Welcome back to Module 5. We're glad you're here. You are almost finished with the training series, and we thank you very much for your continued participation in furthering your education on addiction and recovery to help improve outcomes for individuals, communities, and society. This module and improve your self-care and possibly your compassion fatigue by learning better how to engage with individuals that experience substance use disorder. I'm going to share my screen now, and we are on Module 5, which is Recovery Capital and Pathways of Recovery. And you can see here that SAMHSA, which again is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, has outlined 4 dimensions of the recovery process. And what SAMHSA has determined through all their research is that in order for folks to have a better chance at achieving sustainable recovery, then there's these 4 dimensions that we as community partners and stakeholders need to be looking at to increase resources and understand the recovery process to better support individuals through it. So the first dimension of the recovery process is health. And you can see that it says overcoming or managing one's disease, as well as living in a physically and emotionally healthy way. And so we talk about overcoming and managing one's disease. That refers back to the stages of recovery where we learn how to manage our cravings through redirecting our behavior, managing the obsession, changing our lifestyle patterns to remove us from situations that put us at high risk before. So health, you can think of as the 7 dimensions of wellness. There's spirituality, there's financial health, there's emotional health, and the ability to have therapeutic relationships and therapeutic support. So once again, that is the first dimension of recovery process. And then you can look at community, which shows relationships and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. And all of those are important in all of our lives. In working with those who experience substance use disorder, most people have burned their bridges and their healthy support systems are no longer in place. And we want to look at how do we reestablish that? How do we help them reestablish healthy support networks that will be reliable and dependable and support and encourage them through this very difficult journey? And then we see home, which is a stable and safe place to live. And research shows that we all need a safe place to rest our head, and that outcomes are improved when individuals have some type of secure housing. And that means they're not sofa surfing, they're not unhoused, and they're perhaps living in an environment where they might, for the first time, feel what it's like to feel, quote unquote, safe, away from drug use. And then at the bottom, you see purpose. And that's really what we're going to talk about. All of these we'll be discussing in Recovery Capital and Pathways. But when we talk about purpose, individuals with substance use disorder generally have to restore or build for the first time meaningful daily activities, such as jobs, school, family, caretaking, hobbies, education, anything that can bring them some meaning or purpose or joy to their lives. And then, of course, incomes, resource in order to financially sustain their well-being. So these are SAMHSA's 4 dimensions of recovery. And what I'm going to do now is ask you to reflect on your own life for this activity. And I'm going to ask you to think about, what is it in your life that you value the most? When we think about our lives are made up of different components of activities, relationships, values, and things that bring us meaning and purpose. They help us thrive in life. So what do you value the most in your life? If you have a piece of paper next to you, go ahead and write down a couple, 3 things. And maybe you wrote down something like family, faith, friendships. And you could have written down any number of things that you value as an important part of your identity. So now let's think about, what are your principles? Go ahead and write a couple down, things that are characteristic of your moral behavior. Maybe it's loyalty, honesty, dependability, trustworthy, empathetic. It could be any number of moral characteristics that help make up who you are. And now I ask you to think about, how do you spend your time during the day? Because however you spend your time during the day is a significant part of your personal identity. And so maybe it's work and exercise, sports, nature, cooking, volunteering, helping others, grandparenting, caretaking, knitting, woodworking, knife making. It could be anything that brings you joy and carves out your place in the world. So go ahead and try to think of a couple of things that how do you spend your time during the day? And then lastly, I'll ask you, what brings you joy? In our identities, we each have different things that bring us joy for different reasons and at different levels. And so maybe pets bring you joy, maybe your friendships bring you joy, maybe your work brings you a tremendous amount of joy, your family, your faith. It could be any number of things that bring you joy in your life. These things all allow us as individuals, they are all unique to us. And as individuals, they are our tree of life. These items are the leaves on our tree that helps us thrive in our lifetimes. And now I want you to think about, what would it feel like if I said to you, you have to decide which of these are the four most important things in your life that you would not want to have removed. So maybe you take a look at your list right now and you determine 2 or 3 or 4 of these things that are on your list that really represent your identity the most. And whatever you picked, maybe you said family, work, honesty, and pets. And I'm working with you as a coach of some sort, and we're discussing ways to improve your life. And I say to you, Sam, in order for you to move forward in your life, effective immediately, you can no longer have pets in your life or family in your life. I know that seems a little far-fetched, right? But just work with me through this activity. And imagine what it would be like for you if I said to you, the things that you value, you can no longer have in your life. Maybe your health is compromised now. What do you think that would feel like for you? Maybe you're saying hurtful, devastating. Maybe you're saying it's fine, I could do without it. But I want you to take that experience and work with me through this activity. Now imagine a person who's actively using. And they've been using actively for quite some time. And the things that they valued, if they've ever even established things that they valued, depending on their age of first use, Maybe they start to disappear from their life. Their family and friends disown them. Maybe their principles go right out the window. There's no more honesty, loyalty, and dependability. They're not spending their time anymore, showing up on time for work, going to the gym, exercising outdoors, knitting, cooking, or on any of their hobbies. Maybe. And maybe the joy that they once felt with their friends and their pets and their work and their hobbies, maybe that's all gone too. Because if we think back to the Dr. Kevin McCauley's movie about the pleasure threshold, we want to remember that things that bring people joy without substance use disorder, when they enter into substance use disorder, those things no longer bring them joy because the pleasure threshold has been raised. So there's no more joy in these individual lives. And their tree of life starts to look a little different. The leaves are falling, the branches are dying, and they're not thriving in their own personal lives anymore. And eventually, once gone into full-blown addiction and they've been using for any period of time, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is for each individual, the leaves are gone and they're nothing but an empty shell. They're still living, they're still breathing, there's still roots in the ground, but they're not flourishing. And once this happened, the things that a person with active substance use disorder can typically start to identify with and value is survival, drugs, protecting their secret of use. Some of the principles might look like blaming others all the time, threatening others, fear, and abusive relationships, just to name a couple. And they probably could spend their time, not always, but for many, in very unsafe situations. Drug seeking is a way in which many people with active addiction spend their days, trying to manipulate how are they going to find enough drugs to get them through this day. Hustling, isolating, and they find joy in drugs. They find joy in drug seeking because drug seeking has become the habitual pattern of behaviors. It has become the lifestyle. And they find joy in avoiding people like you and me who want to help them. And then they go into isolation. They start isolating to avoid stigma, even the self-stigma, because they're doing it to themselves bad enough. Avoid discrimination, avoid socialization, and avoid shame. And then we say to them as they come into our systems and ask for help, and we say, you know, folks, all of those things that made up your daily routines and your daily patterns and brought any type of meaning to your life, whatever level of meaning that was, the things that kept you alive, I'm going to take them all away. Systems say you can no longer use drugs anymore. You can no longer live that lifestyle. You have to change everything about yourself and achieve abstinence. What do you think it feels like for that person who the only thing they know is the drugs are survival for them? What it feels like. If you can imagine, it probably feels pretty empty and pretty lonely. And as community partners and loved ones, we want to understand that we're not just asking them to stop using drugs, we're asking them to change their whole lifestyle, go through a period of emptiness and loneliness, and fill it back up with meaningful, healthy decisions, healthy activities, healthy values to restore their spirit and their full potential. It's a process. Coming up, we're going to talk about recovery capital. Hey there, this is Ginger. I hope you're learning a lot from this series. I'm asking for your help in supporting my tireless efforts. There's a few ways in which you can support me. Tell your friends about this video series, subscribe and like each video here on YouTube down below, make a donation on my website, or invite me to deliver this training in person. Together, we can all be part of the solution. Hope to see you soon, and thank you.